Morning, everybody. You good? Good. Hopefully you've read most of chapters 26 to 36. We're going to talk about Jacob this morning. Let me ask you a question. Do you like Jacob? How many of you like Jacob? If Jacob was sitting beside you this morning, would you like Jacob? Yeah, that's a different question, isn't it? Jacob's great when he's on the pages of the Bible, but not in flesh and blood. Jacob's one of my favorite characters, but when I thought about it one day, I thought, actually, I don't think I'd really like him very much. Because he's a little bit hard to trust, isn't he? Isn't he? Yeah, he's I don't know if he's quite slimy, but he's a little bit slippery. You know, you're never quite sure what he's going to do. So, okay, let's flip over to the first slide, and we'll begin to talk about this a bit more. Does anybody want to tell me essentially if you summarize the story of Jacob, what would it be? There's this guy, and he's from the Middle East, and no, what would you say? Okay. Saves his father for the firstborn blessing, yeah. Runs away to his uncles, yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, he tricks his father and his brother and gets the birthright. He runs away to his uncle, which is really no treat. And then he marries twice, has kids, runs away from there, and eventually has to come back and face his brother and settles in the land. So that's a pretty good summary of the story. Yeah. So let's go to the next slide. We'll pick up at chapter 27. Oh, actually, we'll pick up at actually 25. Oh, this is the outline, by the way. If you've noticed, I put a couple of things in blue. When I outline, sometimes I like to just see is there anything that's similar. And if you notice that near the beginning of the story, Jacob, one of his significant events is at Bethel, in Reading. Right, he's at Reading. It's funny, actually, in our movement, if we say Bethel, everybody knows it's Reading. But in reality, there's like 5 billion churches called Bethel in the world. You drive down the street anywhere, it's like Bethel Baptist Church. It's kind of interesting. But anyway, that was a side note. What happens at Bethel? Or Bethel? Not the Bill Johnson place, that's right. What happens? He has a dream, okay, in which, he meets God. It's a pretty powerful dream. In fact, it does talk about it as a dream, but it seems like it's an opening into reality, is what he's seeing. It's not just symbolic. It's actually real in that sense. And but then. When you see he ends up coming, just like that. He ends up coming back to Bethel again, or Bethel again, by the end of his life. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Okay, next slide, Kev. So we pick up in 25, verse 12-ish. Somebody want to read that? Somebody with an English accent. Hello, there you go.
Isaac prayed to the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was barren. She was barren, and the Lord answered him. And Rebekah, his wife, conceived. But the child struggled together with her. So she went to inquire of the Lord. The Lord said, 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples will be separated from your body, and one people shall be stronger than the other. and the older shall serve the younger. When her days to be delivered were fulfilled, behold, there were twins in her womb. Now the first came forth red all over like a hairy garment, and they named him, say that? Esau. There you go. Afterwards his brother came forth, and his hand holding on to Esau's heel. So his name was called Jacob.
Excellent. Good. So probably the story of the birth is important in telling us what's going to happen. You realize that she was barren for 20 years. What does that remind you of? Sarah, that's right. So again, you're back to this barren wife theme, except that there's not another woman on the scene. The Jacob and Esau struggling in the womb, does that make you think of anything? Not the womb part, but Cain and Abel. Okay, remember I talked about brothers. Brothers in Genesis are kind of an important theme. And it seems that brothers in Genesis, they just don't get along very well. How many of you have siblings? You ever fight with them? Yeah, all the time. When I was a kid, my parents both worked, so I stayed with this family. You know, they would drop me off in the morning, pick me up at night after work, and they had two older brothers, and invariably the two of them were at each other. I was an only child at that point, so it was a bit like, I don't know what to do here, and they were always at each other, and it was pretty fierce sometimes, and not fun to be in the middle of that. So one of the things Robert Alter talks about is that biblical literature is actually quite it's quite sparse. It doesn't tell you very much. And one of the ways that they fill out the picture is that they make you think of something before. So in this case, what you're intended to do is see Esau and Jacob like Cain and Abel. And you're supposed to take whatever you've kind of felt about Cain, for instance, and sort of superimpose it onto Esau. In other words, we don't probably like him very much. You know, he's kind of a bit dangerous as a person. And obviously we fast forward a little bit here from when they're born. But the first, there's a really interesting statement that's made. Oh, actually, just go to the next slide, and I'll just talk about this for a second. But their names, Esau is red, Admoni, that's the name, and like a hairy garment, which is Adrath Seir. What's interesting is they named him Esau, which is weird because Esau doesn't mean either of those things, which is normally what happens. They tell you he was, there was this, and therefore he was named that. But he has an alternate name, which you come across very quickly, which is Edom. Oh, you can go back when you get a chance. And Edom is like that first word, red, and the capital of what would become Edom, the Edomites, their capital is Seir, which is the same word. So there's kind of I wouldn't say a name play, but it tells you a little bit about the future and why they're named. And Jacob is named Jacob because... Somebody yell it out. Yeah, he's grabbing the heel as they're coming out of the womb. As children, he's holding on, and he's got the heel. And the idea of being a heel grabber is somebody who's a bit like a deceiver. That's not how you want to name your kids. Oh, yeah, liar. Come on to me, little liar. There we go. So that's his. He's going to carry that around with him, which he does, doesn't he? His whole life is just filled with like deception and manipulation. Not great qualities. Okay, you can go to the next slide now. This is a bit. Yeah, okay. I've not quite said this correctly, but what it says in the text in verse 27, and you don't really get this in English. Because, at least in the NIV, it says, he was a quiet man. He lived among the tents. And Esau is like the field and stream guy. Come on, let's go hunting. Let's go camping. Let's kill and eat red meat. You know, that's kind of what he's like. And Jacob is the opposite. And so they translate it as he was like a quiet man. He liked to stay at home. He liked to cook in the kitchen. Mama's boy. Yeah, maybe, especially when you see his mom get involved. So they're very opposite. Even though they're born at the same time, they're very opposite. The word, though, it's a curious word, and it's a cute, like it's translated here as a quiet man, but that's not actually what it means. Everywhere else in Scripture, it means somebody who's innocent, who's sort of moral and righteous, and which is a bit of a what? You've got to be kidding! We know Jacob. There's no way he's like this. But what they're really saying is there's something that he has that is really what God likes. If you're watching probably in most literature, when you have two characters that are closely together, they often contrast, and that highlights parts of each, and that's what's happening here. So you have this first scene once they're born. What happens in this first scene? Come forth, brilliant people. Come forth. Yeah. That's right. So Jacob is, I was going to say doing Gordon Ramsay in the kitchen, but that wouldn't be working, would it? Because he'd be swearing at Esau. So he's cooking in the kitchen, like Ben Jackson on the weekend. He's cooking in the kitchen, and he's got this great stew that he's made. And Esau comes in from hunting, and he's really hungry. And in fact, the text talks about it. He says this statement. In English, they've translated it as, quick, let me have some of that red stew. I'm famished. But actually, it's much more like, give me that red stuff. He's just, to use somebody else's phrase, he's inarticulate with hunger. He can't even think of what to say. It's like, give me this. And Jacob's like, yeah, why don't you just give me the birthright first? You know what the birthright is? You get most of the stuff. When your parents pass on, you get most of the stuff. And you're the leader. And so, this is a long way. It's not binding in any sort of legal sense, but he's like, yeah, I'll give you some food I'll give you some lentil stew if you give me the birthright. Which is a bit manipulative. And Esau just doesn't care. He's like, yeah, fine, that's right. Just slop it down here for me, man. And so automatically in this first scene, you're supposed to really see who they are. Esau, on the one hand, is a man of appetite. He what matters to him is everything sensual. Jacob, on the other hand, is a bit of a manipulator. And he's got his eye on the future. Now he might wiggle his way into getting it, but he does have his eye on the future. So already you've sort of set the stage for these two characters. Would you say that either of these qualities are good qualities? If you were to just quickly make a quick assessment of the two of them, what do you think God likes more? What's that? Okay, looking at things in the long term. Do you think God enjoys I'm going to slip and slide my way into getting what I want? Not really. How about just give me everything I want because I want it now? Yeah, God loves that. No, God doesn't love that. So neither of those qualities are very good qualities. In fact, in some ways you'd think, God, what could you do? Could you choose another family, please, or have another child? Because neither of these guys are going to make it. It actually kind of gives you hope in a way, doesn't it? Like, oh, Lord, sometimes I do things and I'm just, well, wow, you used Jacob, so maybe there's hope for me. And then it says at the end, the writer makes sure that we note, Esau despised his birthright. And then 26, I'm going to come back to that in a little bit, but this is where another one of these sister-wife episodes where Isaac goes down to somewhere with his wife, and they have the little... Now, you know what, I'll tell you about it right now. There's one thing. It's pretty much the same kind of story as you have before. There was a famine, and in verse 2, 26:2, the Lord appeared to Isaac and said, don't go down to Egypt. And why would he think of going to Egypt? That's where you go when there's a famine. Don't go to Egypt, but live here. And just one quick note in verse 8. This is probably a little play on words. Remember, we talked about laughing. There's a lot of stuff about laughing. So in verse 8, when Isaac had been there a long time, Abimelech, king of the Philistines, looked down from a window. How did the king know that the person he really liked was actually not the patriarch's sister? In this case, he looks down from a window and he saw Isaac caressing his wife Rebekah. Actually, the word is Isaac. He saw Isaac Isaacing his Rebekah. So, anyway. So he figures that one out. Anyway, I thought you'd be interested in that. No Isaacing here in the school, please. That's verboten. Okay, so then we pass on to a little time, and now we come to the blessing part. How does Jacob get the blessing? Does Jacob want to get the blessing? Yeah. Yeah, his mom. This is really interesting. When you read this, you get this sense that there are favorites. Esau is Isaac's favorite. I really like the good food. Go kill me a moose and let's have moose stew tonight. Good, you're the greatest son ever. And but then you have Jacob, who seems to be his mama's favorite. His mama's. Everybody say mama. She's got to have a mama. Yes, mama's favorite. And so she's all concerned about her favorite getting what she wants, or what he probably wants it as well. And so she's determined to get this. What's his response? Okay, or no, I'm not doing that. What does he say? Yeah, how am I going to do it? It's not no, it's more, but I'm going to get caught. Just very interesting. And her plan is what? What does she do? What does she say? What's that? That's right. Prepare a stew, put some fur on, get your mink coat out. I guess they didn't have mink coats, did they? But yeah, put some hairy stuff on you. Why? Why is that? Because Esau's hairy. That's probably why he had to go and get women from another country. Because, godly women don't like hairy men. That thought. Away. Yeah, so Harry and the stew, and still Isaac still is confused because he can hear the voice and he knows the difference. Remember, Isaac is kind of blind at this point. This takes a lot of guts, don't you think? And it's really, when I read this, I feel this huge sense of betrayal. Imagine your child comes in. You're actually he's in a somewhat defenseless position in the sense that he can't see. And there's this whole manipulation and deception, huge deception that Jacob pulls. And Isaac just, he's a little suspicious, but he just falls for it. And it's just wrong, isn't it? It just feels wrong. What's so weird about that, though? What's weird about this whole thing? I mean, besides the fact that he gets away with it. What's the outcome? He gets the blessing. Come on, how fair is that? It's not fair. God, what are you thinking? Do you think God's in the middle of this? Do you think when we do something that's just wrong, that God can use it? I wonder how that works. I don't know how that works. Yeah.
Already when they're in the womb that this will happen, or something like it. So when Rebecca does what she does, I guess it's because she thinks she's serving God because he already said so.
Maybe that's so, because there is this prophetic word that's given. The two are struggling in the womb, and the older is going to serve the younger. So maybe she does have in the back of her mind, this isn't going to work out the right way. And Esau's out there, when he comes back, he's going to get everything, and he's going to get the blessing, and we can't let that happen. So I'm going to help this along. I'm going to help this along by making sure it works.
Like in this story, like Jacob, like he's known as like the deceiver and stuff, but I personally, I think Rebecca's far more deceptive. Like she's the one who came up with the plan and kind of laid out how he could accomplish it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he didn't just get it like out of thin air. Maybe he got it from his mom. Yeah. Maybe that's why she likes him. He takes after her. Yeah, that's true. Hey, by the way, let me just back up. We'll hold this story, okay? Put a pin in this story for a second. If you go back to when Isaac and Rebekah meet, which is in chapter 25, it's a love story. If you no, you know what? Forget that. We'll come to it. No, we won't. Yes, no. Okay. Okay, go back to 25. Okay, or 24. So Abraham's old, and he's well advanced in years, and he says, you know what, I need to get a wife for my son. And I'm probably a bit too old to travel, and so I'm going to take my, he calls in his chief servant, has him swear an oath, and sends him on his way. And don't go back to the land of my forefathers, my family. Go back to that area and find a good woman, and may God bless you in this. And so if you remember, the servant says, well, how am I going to know this? I'm going to put out, we would call this a fleece, wouldn't we? God, if you do this, then I'll know it's really you. And so essentially what he says is, when I come to get water, if I see a woman when I come to the well, then if she has water, I'm going to ask her for something to drink. And if she says, let me water your camels, then I'll know this is God. This is the woman. And do you know why that is? Do you know why that's such an amazing sign? There are 10 camels, and they can drink, I forget now what it is, but they can drink like 10 times their body weight, something like that. And when you go to a well, we're not talking about, not like that. When you go to the well, it's like this. This is heavy. And she does this like 10 times or something. It's a huge amount of work. It's like saying, hey, can you see if my signal light is working? No, it's not working. Let me change out your transmission while you're here. It's a huge amount of work. And so he sees this woman, and bingo, she does this. And all the words describing her are action words. She's a woman of action. And this is important for later on. Oh, by the way, verse 16, the girl was very, very beautiful. And then, if you go down to verse 28, of course, she's all excited and she runs back. In verse 28, the girl ran and told her mother's household about these things. And by the way, Abraham's servant brings a lot of, I was going to say booty, but that's not right either. Cash, all those kind. He has rings, a lot of stuff. I mean, what is it? He has 10 camels, is it? Why? Because he has a lot of stuff to give away. And so in verse 29, now Rebekah had a brother named Laban, and he hurried out to the man at the spring. And as soon as he'd seen the nose ring and the bracelets on his sister's arms, and had heard Rebekah tell what the man said to her, he went out to the man and found him standing by the camels. Why are you standing there? I prepared the house and a place for the camels. This is a little hint, by the way. You know how many times you read these verses and are just like, oh, yeah, I'm just reading that and thinking about what I'm going to have for lunch. And actually, it's really telling you something. What's it telling you about Laban? I mean, who cares if Laban's here? What's it telling you? He's greedy. When he saw the stuff that had been given, we got to invite this guy in because he could be the next Bill Gates or something. He's got lots of cash. Let's get him in here. We want to marry into this family. So when we run into Laban later, it's no surprise to us. He's not a fun guy. And then there's this whole long sort of back and forth they go on. There's a blessing in verse 60. O sister, may you increase to be thousands and thousands, and your offspring possess the gates of their enemies. And it sort of fits right in with the promise, doesn't it? And now Isaac had come from Beer Lahai Roi. Do you know what that is? Do you remember what that was? It's the well of the one who sees me. Remember that episode? She takes her veil, Isaac brought her into the tent of his mother Sarah, in verse 67, married Rebekah, and she became his wife. He loved her, was comforted after his mother's death. There's kind of like a dunk, dunk, dunk. And what you see in this is that Isaac is quite passive. He didn't go to get his wife. Dad sent, his man. And so you have this man who's fairly passive and this wife who's very active. And now you fast forward into the birth of their kids and the blessing, and you see this, don't you? You see Isaac is just kind of there, can't really see much, and all the actions being acted upon him, including the action that Rebekah has. She's like, I'm going to take matters into my own hand and make it happen. So, the response. What is Esau's response when he gets back? What's that? He's really, really angry, isn't he? In fact, it says that. So he's given the blessing. In verse 27:30, after Isaac finished blessing him and Jacob had scarcely left his father's presence, his brother Esau came running in. You get that? It's like, hurry, because I'm not sure. I'm not sure when Esau's going to get back. I got to get out of here. Oh, okay, Dad, thanks for the blessing. And just makes it. He just gets out of there when Esau arrives. And Esau's, he brings the food, and there's this confusion because, I thought you were just in here. Who was that? And automatically, his brother knows because, they've lived together for however many years, at least 16, 20, 30. And they know each other. And if anybody's going to trick Dad, it's going to be that stupid brother of mine. And so then there's this exchange. Who are you? I'm your son, your firstborn Esau. Isaac trembled violently, verse 33. And in verse 34, when Esau heard his father's words, he burst out with a loud, bitter cry. Bless me too, Father. I mean, he suddenly realizes what's gone. And he can never get that back. Of course, he does get a blessing, and it's not a very good blessing. So he's angry. Verse 41, Esau held a grudge against Jacob because of his blessing his father had given him. Days of mourning for my father are near, and then I'm going to kill my brother. Aha, Cain and Abel. And so what's the excuse that's given for sending Jacob away from his brother's reach? What's that? That's the real reason, is to keep him safe. But what is the excuse? Marriage, yeah. Rebecca despises the women that Esau has married. So it's a good excuse. Let's send Jacob away to our people to get him married off. And of course, Esau, when he realizes how much his parents don't like his wives, the fact that they're not from the family, then he also tries to marry into the family of Ishmael, who was sort of related. So he flees. On the way, he has this dream. He takes a stone, he puts it under his head. We're in chapter 28. What is it that God says to him? This is a key part of the story. What is it that he says? Well, you've just blown it. And I guess that's the end for you. First of all, what is the dream? Yeah, it's about heaven. What is it that he sees? He sees angels. He sees messengers going up and down. And that word is variously translated as ladder, staircase, ramp. Probably the picture is of a sort of like a ziggurat or something, what they would call like a temple, had lots of stairs going up to the top, up to the heavens. So he sees this, and he sees the messengers going back and forth between God and the earth to be carried out. And he's pretty impressed, isn't he? No, first dream. Is there another dream before that? No, I think that's just the dream. Yeah, chapter 28. Whew. Scared me for a moment. It's like, have I got this wrong? And he's really pumped, isn't he? How many of you have ever had a dream that was like, not the same substance, but was so real about God? It was like, wow, he's like right here. Have you ever had a dream like that? Sort of, maybe. How many of you have had God dreams? Yeah, so many more of you. This, if it came with that sense of reality, it would be really overwhelming. And what's Jacob's response to all of this besides, wow? Okay, let's put it this way. If you had a dream like this where you saw the angels going up and down to heaven, and you saw God there, what would you do first? What would be your natural reaction? Fall on the ground, fall out of bed, yeah, fall on the ground. He's already on the ground, so. What, and what? Thank God, worship. It would be like, oh man, you are the only one. I'm never going to serve anyone else. I'm never going to do anything wrong. You're God. When you do that, what's his response besides wow? You'd put a stone and put oil on it. Okay. He does that, kind of. Oh, puts a bunch of stones there, doesn't he? He makes a mark. This place used to be called Lutz. It's not a very good name. We'll call it Bethel, because it's the house of God. But what else does he do? He makes a vow. What is the substance of the vow? Yeah. He's like, if you'll do all the things you said you'll do, then I'll serve you. Oh, that takes a lot of chutzpah, doesn't it? I didn't spit this time, as I did yesterday. It takes a lot I don't know. If it was me, I would just be like, oh, my word, God, you're everything. But he's a bit like, wow, if you do all the stuff you say you do, then I'm going to serve you. Of course, he automatically is kind of leaning that way anyway. But it's a bit of an interesting response. Like, I'm hedging my bets here. Yeah. Yeah. I sometimes wonder if tithing is just kind of a, they had all sorts of practices that we don't really know much about, and I just wonder if that was one of them. One of the things that you kind of did in your worshiping God, you sometimes presented a tenth of something. But yeah, this is one of the places that if you're a supporter of the idea of tithing, you can go back here because this shows a form of tithing before even the law begins. Yeah. If you do this, then I'll come back. I'll give you a tenth. I'll give you a tip. Actually, it's less than a tip, isn't it? Used to be a tip. Now it's not. Now a tip is 15%, at least here. Okay. So he does that, and then he goes on, and he goes, and where does he meet Rachel? At the supermarket? Because, what's that? With Laban, not quite. There's a specific spot. At a well. Anybody else meet anybody that they marry at a well? Oh, Rebecca. Anybody else in the Bible? Jesus? Actually, you're right. But I'll talk about that in a second. Anybody else? Moses. Moses meets his wife at a well too, doesn't he? Probably in the ancient world, it's a good place to meet your wife. Don't go to the bar. Don't go to the supermarket. Go to the well. Because all the really good girls go there. Okay? And when you go to the well, actually, if you notice, probably the way these stories are presented is they give you a bit of a theme of the person's life. So again, for Isaac, he's not even there. And his wife is very active, which really carries through that story, which is a very short story. Jacob, what does he have to do when he gets to the well? Find a place to stay, yeah. Where's the Motel 6? No, what else does he do? Give them a tip about livestock. He moves the stone, doesn't he? And if you notice about Jacob, he sleeps on a stone. He moves a stone. He's building things with stones, and it's kind of a theme for his life. I mean, his life is hard. It seems like everything is a struggle for him. You ever know people that are like that? You just think, how can so many bad things happen to somebody like you? How come this stuff always happens to you? Boy, man, your life is full of drama. Never happens to me. It's his life. It's a theme of his life. Moses, if you can think about Moses, when Moses gets to the well, what is it that he does? Has a drink? He has to fight off some other people, doesn't he? And that's a theme for his life. That's what he does. He fights for his people. He goes into the desert. He goes to war with the Amalekites, I believe it is. It's a kind of a theme, a precursor for his life. The question, you talked about Jesus at the well with the Samaritan woman. It's hard to know, but it could be that if you were an ancient reader and you were reading that story, having all that background, you would have thought, oh, Jesus has met his wife. Which of course isn't true, but you might have thought that because you have those precursors. So he meets her, and what does he think of Rachel? Not Jesus, but Jacob. Yeah, he likes her. He doesn't just like her. Yeah, she kisses him. Doesn't she kiss him? He kissed her. Oh, man. That's a little bit too far on a first date. Probably kissed on the cheek, don't you think? And then he cried. It's true. Yeah. Okay, first date, I'm going to kiss the girl, I'm going to cry. Not the manly way to go. Yeah, that's good. Oh, yeah, he was like, oh, I've never seen anything like this person before. He really likes her. Like with a capital L, likes. They're just friends. They're just friends, that's it. Now it says Jacob was in love with Rachel. Okay, so again, then we meet Laban, don't we? Blah, blah, blah. Verse 13, 29:13. As soon as Laban heard the news about Jacob, his sister's son, he hurried to meet him. He embraced him, kissed him, and brought him to his home. And there Jacob told him all these things. And then Laban said to him, oh, you are my flesh and blood. You just belong here. After Jacob had stayed with him a month, Laban said, just because you're a relative, shouldn't you, just because you're working here, you shouldn't have to work for free. What would you like? Oh, I'd really like to marry your daughter, sir, because she's fine and I'm in love. And that's what it says. It says the older one was Leah. And what does he say about Leah? What does the writer say about Leah? Yeah, she has nice eyes. This is what he says. But Rachel, she was lovely in form and beautiful, and Jacob was in love with her. I'll work for 7 years if I can marry your daughter, sir. And of course Laban says, well, I guess it's better to marry, probably to himself, I guess it's better to marry her off to him than some other guy that I don't know about. So on we go. And the result of that is he works for 7 years, and he's so in love that it's like, I didn't even notice I was working. Yeah, the time, what? 7 years have gone by. It's like 7 minutes. Yeah, when you're in love, you can do anything. Yeah, sure. I'll mow your field for you. I'll do the dishes every night for you. Because you're in love. For 7 years, he's in love. And then, yeah. Oh, how old is she? Yeah, no, 9.5. No, I don't know. But probably, the custom is normally, 12, 13, 14, probably. So, 7 years, maybe I don't know. I have no idea. But Leah's older, I guess, and so if you wait 7 years, I mean, you don't normally look at like a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old and go, wow, I'm in love with that child. So she's gonna be somewhere around, I would guess, 12 at maybe the earliest. I'm just guessing off the top of my head, I'm just making it up. And so 7 years, okay, so 19. Maybe that's a bit old, kind of, to be getting married, now that I think about it. And Leah's a bit older, so yeah, we got to get her married off because she's past her prime already. I don't know how a father thinks in the Middle East, so yeah. Can you imagine waking up on your wedding morning and it's not the person you thought you were marrying? That's why we don't have veils so much anymore. You can see through the veils because you don't want that to happen. That would be horrible. And of course, Laban is like, well, it's not the way we do things here. We never really marry off the younger one first. The older one has to go first. But if you want to work for another 7 years, you can have the other one too. Oh, that just seems wrong, doesn't it? But they did different stuff than we do. Yeah. Well, that's a great question. Is it really true what Laban's saying? From what we know of Laban, it's hard to tell if he's telling the truth. Because Laban is just as much of a deceiver as Jacob is. Maybe better. The family gets it honestly, I'm sure. Yeah, and by the way, the term deceives and deception just runs through this whole story quite a bit. That's Jacob's response. What is this you've done? I served you for Rachel. Why did you deceive me? It's not our custom to give the younger marriage for the older one. Just finish the bridal week, okay? No, I don't want to finish the bridal week. But he did. Okay, so, and then you have this story in verse 31. It goes on. And what's the dynamic in the family now? Okay, so now Jacob's married. He has 2 wives. Is it like, this is great, I can have sex every night? And is that how he thinks of it? It's not so great, is it? Why? Yeah, he doesn't love Leah. He loves the younger sister. And so what is that like in the family? Imagine what that would be like. That would be horrible, wouldn't it? I mean, maybe none of us have ever experienced this, but it's possible for us to feel like, oh, my parents love my younger brother or sister more than me. They get everything and I don't get anything. All the kind words go to them and not to me. They go to their baseball games and soccer games, but not mine. Even that's painful, isn't it? Now imagine, you're looking forward to all your fulfillment, getting married and moving out of your family's house, which of course isn't happening in this case, and then it's you're not loved. And it's pretty obvious. That's painful, really painful. That might make you a little bit bitter, don't you think? Great thing about God is He loves her. This is in verse 31. When the Lord saw that Leah was not loved, He opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. Wow, that's an interesting dynamic. And then you have some children. Do you want to go to the children, by the way? Go to the line. Oh, by the way, this is the route that he takes. It's like 600 or 700 miles, something like that. Yeah. 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 Why is this barren woman theme happening a lot? I guess number one, on a natural level, it happens a lot. And it probably happened then more than it happens now. But part of it might be, I'm just sort of say this off the top of my head and see if it makes sense. But sometimes in stories how, like for instance, Robert Alter talks about, these are called type scenes, but in a Western, anybody familiar with Westerns? Okay, so the standard Western was that, the good guy always wins because he's faster, or as Robert Alter says, he has a hyperreflexive reflex or whatever. Okay, he's faster on the draw than the bad guy. Doesn't matter what else happens, he's always going to win. And even when you have a variation on that, let's say the guy, he has a withered right hand, you just know he's going to use something else and still win. There's sort of you kind of expect this in a certain genre of story. And so you have this barren woman theme, partly because, in fact, it happens so often, and the dynamics happen so often that it's just a given. You just see it often in situations in their society. And you kind of know, a promised child is going to come from the barren woman. You have that kind of expectation. It may be that they, in their storytelling, because it was the barren woman situation happened so often that in their storytelling it was a normal thing, and you could tell, there's a bit of anticipation it's going to happen. And this is a variation, a little different than some of the others, but what is it? It's not Grimm's fairy tales. Yeah, we have the wicked stepmother. Cinderella. Why are there so many stories from that area with wicked stepmothers? Oh, come on! Is every stepmother wicked? Yes. No. No, they're not. But probably women died so often, leaving a man and a child, maybe female child, at least maybe, and of course he's going to marry again. And he marries again, and that woman does not have affection for the child, and the child is always going to feel, hard done by, and often is mistreated. And so you have this kind of recurring theme about the wicked stepmother that happens, because it kind of happened. It was people's fear. They saw it happening. They experienced it. And so in your storytelling, you put in that kind of thing. And so here you have certain things that are kind of repeated, partly because everybody had an idea of what it was like. Yeah, my sister, she was barren, and it's not fun in her household. My mother, was for a long time, and then boom, there you go. It's really interesting. The previous directors, Stuart and Lily Allen, they when they were directing the school, neither of them, it didn't matter who they married, neither of them were capable of having children. And they had all the tests and everything. And for, I forget how many years, 12, 17, something like that, they just didn't have kids. And it just wasn't possible. And in fact, they had given up praying for it. In fact, they would say at the beginning of each school, when they told their story, they would say, please don't pray for us. Please don't prophesy over us about children, because we have just come to, grips with this. And I really appreciated how they had wrestled through it and come to that. And then when she turned 40, Mahesh Shavda's going down the front row across the way, and he's like, you're going to have a child. And goes on, and she's really mad. It's like, why do people keep doing that? And then she's pregnant. She's 40, which is an interesting biblical number, I think. And out comes this child. And there is so much attention and love and about this child, because the situation was impossible. And then, so it's kind of, there's actually, a little bit of that playing out of the barren woman thing, like right now. So, interesting to see what Jordan will grow up to be like, because her parents are amazing people, and it'll be interesting to see. Anyway, did that answer the question a bit? Good, okay. Another question? Okay, good. So now you have these children. The dynamic in the house is ugly, isn't it? The dynamic is, I'm going to have children. I'm going to get ahead of you. I'm going to be loved by having children. And so Leah has how many kids? 4, and you cannot see them on the screen. But you're going to have Reuben, who's first. I can't remember who's second. No, Simeon's third. Reuben, Levi's second, and then Judah is, I've got 5. Oh, no, I've got 4. Yeah, Simeon, Levi, and then Judah, and they all have a name. And all of the names come out of the situation. So the first one is, see, a man. Look, boom, look, it's a man. I'm going to name him, look, a man. That's what she does. It's weird. But it also is kind of like, see my misery, because she's been in misery. So the first 4 are Leah's naturally by Jacob. Okay? And then and it just seems like in the text that there's this juxtaposition of, no, I'm going to be loved because I'm going to have a child, and I'm going to be significant because I'm going to have a child. And she's getting all her meaning and all her love from having children. And of course, in chapter 30, verse 1, when Rachel saw that she was not bearing Jacob any children, she became jealous. Wow. So there's this cat fight in the house. And there's this statement she says, "Give me children or I'll die." And guess what? She does die. It's a little foreshadowing here. She dies in childbirth, doesn't she? Yeah. So, of course, he's mad. He's angry. Am I in the place of God who's kept you from having children? And so she does what somebody else did. Well, look, here's my servants. Take them. Have children with them. Remind you of anything? Yeah. Hagar. Sarah and Hagar. And we know how that ended, don't we? Not so good. So then you have that happening. So you have this on and on, back and forth. I think it comes to, with Naphtali, it means struggle. Rachel says, "I've had a great struggle with my sister and I have won." I mean, that's great. Great way to name your child. Fight. Punchy or something. Verse 14, during the wheat harvest, Reuben went out in the fields and found some mandrake plants, which he brought to his mother Leah. Rachel said to Leah, "Please give me some of your son's mandrakes." But she said to her, "Wasn't it enough you took away my husband? Will you take my son's mandrakes? Very well. He can sleep with you tonight in return for your son's mandrakes." Why do you think she wants the mandrakes? It's an aphrodisiac. So we're just gonna make things more fertile and make my husband like me more. And okay. Now notice this. Jacob is being passed around between his wives. Like almost like being bought and sold. Can you have prostitution within your own house? I'm not sure, but it's kind of like that. Do you think Jacob feels good about this? Probably not. On the one hand, people are angry with him. People don't want him to show favoritism. There's just a horrible dynamic in this family at this point, at least over this issue. See, she says in verse 16 at the end, "See, I've hired you." So he slept with her. Okay, so on and on. And then verse 22, God remembered Rachel. He listened to her and opened her womb, and she became pregnant and gave birth to a son. He said, "God has taken away my disgrace." And she named him Joseph, Yasaph, which is, he gathered, he added, yeah. Were they very young? That they couldn't bear children? I don't think so. I mean, that's a great thought. I'd never thought of that before, that they were too young, so maybe Rachel couldn't. And I don't think so, only from the reasoning of, well, if he fell in love with her and she was very, I mean, again, you probably don't fall in love with an 8-year-old. She's not beautiful in form and figure at age 8. So probably she's going to be a little bit more at least, and then you add 7 years, and then you add 14 years, so that, or another 7 years, they're probably going to be older. Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be 14. It's going to be 14 years from the time at least that he sees her first, if the 7 years are not a kind of schematic number. No, it's another 7 years after that. 7 days? Oh, right. Okay, good point. Yeah, he works for 7 years, right? So that's still going to be 7 years. If she's 12, she's going to be 19. So then she's too old? You guys are too old. You're 19, 20, 18. Oh, 18, you're all right. I don't think so. I don't think that it doesn't really indicate that. But it's always a possibility, always a thought. Yeah. Go ahead.
Later on in the Old Testament, you see a division in the tribes of Israel. Judah, one other tribe, and the
Simeon.
Judah and Simeon, and then there's 10 other tribes that are.
Oh, Benjamin, Judah and it's here. Yeah, later on, you're talking about two tribes come together, essentially. Yeah. Right. Not really. Well, they're not really, no, because Judah encompasses Simeon, and they're kind of together at one point. And when the kingship happens, it's against the 10 other tribes. And then Judah eventually kind of encompasses Benjamin as well. But no, there's not really any. Yes. Here's what I think you mean. Okay, part of the dynamic, let me remind me of this question again later when we talk about Joseph, okay, because it's germane to this situation, okay? So quickly, now we come to near the end of chapter 30, and Jacob is basically, he's got his 2 wives and his families, but he's doing all this work and nothing's happening for him. So what does he say to his father-in-law? Essentially, just boil it down. I want to go home. And I want to get paid. And so how does he decide who's going to have what? Yeah, it's amazing. Jacob makes this plan. So Jacob says, I'll take all the sort of speckled, spotted, whatever sheep, and you can have the rest. And Laban says, sure, that's fine. And then what does Laban do? He separates from all the herds, everything that could be coming to Jacob, and he has his sons take them off a 3-day journey away. So it's kind of like, I'm going to take out everything that you could get. So you're really not going to get anything. And Jacob's response to that is, what does he then do? That's right. Yeah. Wherever they have dinner, yeah. They mate, yes. Yeah. That's right. So, okay, so picture this. So there's a place where they all drink, etc. And so what he does is when it's time for whatever, reproduction, he takes these strips of poplar or willow or whatever it is, and he takes pieces off them and sticks them in there so that when they're feeding, this is what they look at. There's a logic in their mind. Probably an ancient belief was what you look at, what you picture, especially in times of intense emotion or whatever, that's what you reproduce. So he's doing this thing in order to try and work it out. And then the ones that are produced that are speckled and spotted, he puts them in front of the next bunch. He keeps the weak one from producing speckled and spotted ones, but let the strong ones come and produce speckled and spotted ones, and then he kind of comes and does the same thing again. The problem is it doesn't really work genetically. It doesn't really work like that. So how does that happen? Yeah, God blesses him. Once again, Jacob is thinking, I better take things into my own hands. And you don't find this out until chapter 31, verse 10. In breeding season, I once had a dream in which I looked up and saw the male goats mating in the flock that were streaked, speckled, spotted, and the angel of God came to me in the dream, etc., etc. So it looks like God is actually God in the middle of that. And so what ends up happening is that Jacob's flocks get bigger and bigger, and they're very healthy, but Laban's, they just get weaker and smaller. So, well, you know, guys, when you get married, you probably don't want to have this kind of relationship with your father-in-law. It's like, I'm going to cheat him out of some money. He's tried to cheat me out of some money, so don't do that. It's probably not that great. Okay, I'm going to fast forward here. Of course, they take off, and Laban follows, and Laban's really mad, really angry. Why is that? Not only has he taken all the kids and daughters and big flocks, but what's that? Okay, the sheep, something else. The household gods, the teraphim, is what they're called. You can throw a slide up. I think I have one of these. Basically, they, sometimes they had these little figurines, I suppose, that were sort of your personal gods that you kept in the house. You didn't have to go to the city to pray at the temple, I guess. And so when he catches up, and by the way, this is a huge crime in the ancient Near East. You can't steal someone else's teraphim. It's punishable by death. So this is a big deal, what they've done. Thankfully, Jacob doesn't know. And and Rachel covers it by literally covering it and saying, I'm sorry, I can't get out because, it's that time. And so Dad's like, oh, okay, sorry about that. So he just goes on, and then they make a pact. In 32, and this is probably quite significant. So he's now on his way home. And first of all, as he went on his way, the angels of God met him. And when Jacob saw them, he said, this is the camp of God. And so he named it, basically, encampment. Okay, so he's on his way home, and he has, like, oh my, there's angels again. That's kind of encouraging, isn't it? And then he goes on, and you have these 2 chapters in which Jacob is... See, what's his problem in going home? I mean, he can't stay with Laban because that's just nasty. Now he's got to go home. What's the problem? Yeah, Esau, his brother who promised to kill him. Ever been in turmoil when you had to face somebody? You just knew this is not going to go well. I'm going to have to face the music. And you have that knot on the inside, that turmoil that's around in you, and you're thinking in your head all the time, how can I make this better? How can I fix this? How can I make it smooth when I get home? So that's what he's going through. So he's wrestling, and his again, he thinks, I'm going to try and fix this. So I'll send a gift. I'll send some money. I'll send a whole bunch of money, and maybe that will make my brother feel better about this whole thing. Which is what he does. And then, but he stays behind, doesn't he? So he stays on one side of the river, and what ends up happening? He falls asleep at night, and does he fall asleep? Maybe he doesn't. He has a wrestling match, doesn't he? With a man, an angel. And in the end, he decides what? It's not just an angel. It's God. I've seen the face of God and lived. Holy smokes, Batman. And there's this whole exchange. Bless me. What's your name? You don't need to know my name, but I'll change your name. Okay. And he changes his name, doesn't he? By the way, names are important. Probably names are important now, but they're important then. Changes to, you've struggled with God and man, and you've overcome. See, that's the thing about Jacob, is that this whole process that he's in, from day one to now, it is about struggle, because he struggles with everybody, doesn't he? Just can't seem to get along and be at peace, etc. But it's also a struggle with God. In this whole life of struggle, it's not just humans that he's struggling with. It's also a struggle with God, and God is struggling with him in order to, quote, break him and to reform him, to shape him. What's so powerful about this picture? Come on, when you read this picture, when you read this story, what does it make you think? What's the natural application? What's that? What's the natural application to you? What's that? Perseverance. Say it again. Okay, we can see God. Say what? When you read this, what is the natural application for you? Oh, that's true. Yeah. 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 Okay, yeah. I mean, that's a pretty good point. I mean, here, the whole future of the world, the outcome of the world is resting on this very unlikely character. But I think more than that, you see in this process, Jacob in his life, and I'm just going to bring this all the way around at this moment, but Jacob, in a sense, is wrestling all the time with people. And his character is not the best, is it? And so he comes to Bethel, and he sees this vision of God, and God says, I'm going to do this stuff for you. And he says, okay, if you do that, then you can be my God. And now he goes on the real part of his journey. But he's got to come back and face the music. And he's always wrestling. He's wrestling externally. He's wrestling inside, how to do the right thing, to be the right person. And in the middle of it, it's not just about that wrestle. It's about wrestling with God and God wrestling with us. God trying to change us. And you see what happens when morning comes and he limps across the river. He sees his brother, and he's pretty much resigned to, I really hope I don't die here now, but I guess I better do this. And his brother's response is not what he expects. His brother's is basically embracing. And Jacob's response, and this is an important line, he says, seeing your face is like seeing the face of God. And of course, he just said that, I've seen the face of God and lived. And sometimes in the situations they're just so hard for us. And there's a struggle in our life. God is in the middle of that. God is in the middle of that, trying to change us and reform us and make us more more faithful, more trustworthy, trying to change our character. I think that's a pretty natural application to all of this. And you see that with Jacob. You go forward a few more chapters, and you get back to Bethel, the house of God. And Jacob says, all right, everybody, it's time to give up all the foreign gods. He makes good on his promise. See, this whole journey from the house of God all the way back to the house of God is this wrestling match in order to reform who Jacob is and to bring him to the place where he's ready to give his full allegiance to God, which he does. And sometimes I would say you can also, would be a different kind of point, but sometimes when you're in the struggle with somebody, you see God. Actually, you see what he's doing. You see him. You see his movement. You see his hand, I guess, is the other part of that. You were going to say something? Yeah. 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 That's a very good point. Yeah, Jacob essentially does try to control, get everything for himself, whatever he wants, whatever he needs, and usually does it in not great ways. But it's true. After that point, it seems like although Jacob is still Jacob, there's something quite different, and it does feel like he is a different person in many ways. Like you don't really see the deception side so much, which is a way of control. You don't see that so much. In fact, I don't know, do you see it at all after this point? Not from him anyway. Yeah. Mm. Sure. Yeah. You could, if you put it into sort of real life terms, you could perhaps extrapolate. Yeah, Jacob's not ever, has not really been blessed by his father in most ways, and so he's always trying to get things for himself. And it was interesting the wedding. I think it was last weekend. You guys know Noel Grizetic and Jordan Gruber, right? So they got married, and he has two older brothers, and they're quite a bit older and I guess bigger than he is. And one of the stories they told was how they used to get in trouble all the time because he, as the younger one, would always pretend that they were picking on him. And of course the parents would come in and they would get in trouble and he wouldn't until one day the parents came in before it happened and they saw the whole thing where he's like, stop that, you're hurting me. When in fact he was the one punching them, sort of thing. And anyway, but yeah, younger brothers, sometimes, a little bit like, any younger brothers, younger sister? Who's like the youngest? Okay, everybody move away from these people because, no, I'm just kidding. Of course, firstborns, move away from them too. Okay, let's go ahead and take a break and we'll pick up with Joseph. So if you haven't read that, for the next session, have a quick buzz through it.